Welcome to Hospitality Connection, the podcast where we bring together hospitality experts, innovators, and leaders to share insights, strategies, and stories from the world of hotels, restaurants, and beyond. Each week, Scott Samuels and Alex Gould, your hosts, dive into the latest trends, challenges, and opportunities in hospitality, giving you practical insights and inspiration to thrive in today's industry. Let's connect, learn, and grow together. This is Hospitality Connection.
Hey, Kevin, welcome to the Hospitality Connection, a podcast where the hospitality industry's professionals share their insights, ideas, and a few lessons learned along the way. You and I have known each other for quite a while now. I think it's been over 20 years. I've had a front row seat watching you grow from a corporate restaurant operator to a highly successful independent restaurant owner in the Kansas City area. In fact, the first couple of restaurants you operated and opened were located just within a 10-minute walk from my house. And I used to be a frequent customer and see you quite a bit. I have to say that, and you know this story, but I fell in love with the Louis Mueller sandwich, which I continue to try to duplicate, from your restaurant, Will Jenny's. I know it's no longer open, but I think it was a combination of, grilled Texas toast, smoked brisket, sweet jalapeno peppers, barbecue sauce. What kind of cheese was on it? I can't remember the cheese.
Just cream cheese.
Okay, cream cheese.
Yeah.
It was an amazing sandwich. So, that's been a fond memory for me. Since then, I know your Nick and Jake's concept has continued to grow, and you are really one of the most respected independent restaurant owners in the Kansas City area. So what I'd really like for our viewers to hear a little bit about is the story behind your transition, going from a structured and secure corporate environment and taking the dive and the leap into entrepreneurship in the independent restaurant environment. So I guess we could start there, Kevin. What made you decide to take that leap from the corporate operations to opening your own concepts?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I noticed you two are in sunny Florida, and I'm up here in 51 degrees and rainy, gloomy day here in Kansas City.
You're welcome to come down here whenever you want. We're happy to have
you. This is the fifth job I've ever had. I'll be turning 60 in about a month. Most of the other four jobs were corporate restaurants, albeit the first one was Steak and Ale, and that was a 5-year run while I was in college and after college. And Steak and Ale probably did corporate restaurants as good as anyone, especially back in the 70s and 80s. Went to the Carolinas, and we had just a couple of restaurants at the time. They were California Dreaming and Frank Manzetti's. But the goal was we were luring people from Houston's and luring people from Bennigan's over to make it more corporate. Then ended up in Atlanta with that same company when we opened restaurants in Atlanta, and then went to Rio Bravo Restaurants, which was, a great experience. And we got to see that company grow from, I think I got there, we had 12 restaurants, and when I left, we had 64. Applebee's bought it. So yeah, it was very corporate, and there's some good things about being in part of a corporation. And then I went with a startup up in Chicago that was being run by some old Cheesecake Factory guys. So they had a corporate mentality. We only had one at the time, and it was called the Clubhouse in Oak Brook Center Mall. And that was the first time that I got to see a profit loss statement all the way to the bottom. And I spent only 3 years with them. But that first year, they were tracking $9 million to lose money. That third year, I think we did almost $14 million, and I got to see what the owners were taking home. It was a good amount of money, and I think it was that aha moment of, am I tired of having Applebee's corporate shove marketing programs down my throat and prepared foods and ridiculous training manuals? Did I have a certain level of entrepreneurship? Did I have the concept that I always wanted to do? Did I have that? Yes. And then did I finally see that, wow, you could actually make some money in this business? But it takes a lot of hard work. And in Chicago, during those 3 years, it took a lot of hard work turning it around, growing it by $5 million a year. And we were, that gave me that confidence level of, being able to do it. When people ask me, why do I go from a corporate restaurant to ownership? It's really those three things: that level of entrepreneurship, that level of wanting to be able to make decisions on my own, whether good or bad. Try to make as much money for my family as I could.
That's great. One of the things I always admired about you when I was in the restaurants is you were always visible. You were always there, and interacting with the customers and the staff, and that, from my mindset, meant a lot in terms of, this person really cares. He's really vested in it. But what kind of fears did you have making the move? What did you wrestle with before you made the decision to jump over into the independent environment and start your own concept?
Well, I had I hate the word mentor, but I had a mentor. Phil Hickey was running Rio Bravo at the time. And as I was working my way up from manager to general manager to area manager, franchise consultant, so forth, he vested me with some shares of stock. And they weren't worth anything because we were a privately owned company. But when Applebee's bought it, the stocks were worth something. And then when the stock split and they rose again, and the timing was just great. So I kind of had this little nest egg in my hip pocket, but we never really knew how much it was. We never counted on it. The biggest fear was financial fears, really was the biggest fear. And we quickly realized after the first day that I wasn't going to be doing the books. My business partner came from a much smaller run sales concept, and his general manager and him would do the books. And it wasn't, after the first day, I looked at Doug and I said, I need to hire a bookkeeper. I think I've already hired her. She's working at the front desk. And so, boy, I tell you, when you're wrestling with that problem to make that move to do your own thing, you're not going to have a lot of support. You're out there on an island, and you could lose it all. That really was the biggest fear.
Yeah, I know it's easy when you're a manager and a director of operations working for a larger restaurant group, and things hit the fan and you need to throw money at that problem. It's easy when you're in that position and it's not your money.
Yeah.
How does from your perspective, how did the decision making change when it's your money on the line and it's your name on the line?
Well, you actually think about it twice. You think about it 3 times, but it's easier to spend your own money than it is to spend other people's money. First of all, you don't have to go through that process of trying to relate to someone in the corporate office or an area manager or the president of the company to tell them that we need to upgrade our equipment. I see the equipment, I manage the equipment, and I know it needs to be upgraded, and I'm going to get the best possible refrigeration I can. So the decision making in that restaurant, first of all, I would not suggest, and a lot of people do it. A lot of people think they could run a restaurant without ever working in one. I would never suggest that you do that. So all of those years that I worked in all these other restaurants, quite frankly, I made a lot of mistakes, and I did a lot of good things, but I made a lot of mistakes, and they were at someone else's expense. They weren't at my expense. And when you make a mistake once and you make it twice and you realize that, okay, I need to do things differently, that experience level helps a lot to make those decisions on your own. Being able to rely on your experience is really important.
Yeah, you said something that, it's easier to spend your own money. I couldn't disagree more. I found it very easy to spend Steven Starr's money on things that needed to get fixed around his restaurants. And then when I stepped into my own restaurants, I was penny pinching every step of the way. Obviously, we weren't as capitalized as, a huge restaurateur like him, but I always was very pensive on every single dollar going out. I was wondering, how could we fix this in-house? Is there a way to makeshift this to work? Until you get clipped in the chin when something takes too long in the kitchen and you have unhappy guests.
Yeah.
So I learned that lesson very quickly.
I'm sure you are too, but I'm a very top line person. And the decisions to grow the top line, whether it be replacing your pothole asphalt parking lot with a cement parking lot and taking that on the chin, guests see that. They recognize that. And it's just got to be a part. It's got to be ingrained. We've learned to budget. We've learned, my partner and I, first of all, how do you have a partner for 25 years and now you're opening a new concept with him? How does that work? Well, he's not in the building. He is, and he's great at seeing things from 20,000 feet. So, but we know what each of us needed to get out of out of the restaurant, out of the business each year. We know how much our families need to grow, and we're not greedy. I mean, I drive a Chevy, he drives a Ford. And it's slow, sustainable growth is extremely important. And when you're making capital decisions, you've got to keep that in mind, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I always, fell victim to the comparison, looking at other companies, looking how fast they're growing, watching what they're evolving into, and felt like I needed to keep up. But you need to work at your own pace. You need to do what's right for you, your team, your family. And I think a lot of those decisions, those financial decisions that you make, if you're not looking at the top line, are going to affect you in the long run.
I think that's great advice, though, Kevin. Small, sustainable growth, versus trying to blow things up to the point where you're undercapitalized, you're understaffed, and you fail. I think that's really smart.
Yeah, you've always got to think about, I think we have 220 some odd employees now and spread out between the restaurants. And you got to think about each and every one of them, too, when you're making these decisions and how it affects their work, the work environment. If they're struggling with a Hobart mixer that one day is working and one day is not, the work environment is a lot better. You just make that decision and fix the problem, Yeah.
Now, you mentioned your team, and it's super and vitally important that you protect them and you listen to them. How do you think your leadership style evolved going from a corporate environment to a ownership role?
Yeah, that's difficult, because Scott can attest. We opened our first Nick and Jake's almost 25 years ago. It'll be later this year. And I was in the building all the time. For the first 10 years, I was in the building all the time. And the thing that I learned the most is surrounding myself with people that have the same culture or understand the culture that we're trying to do. And when we opened our restaurant, Scott, we had a little delay in the opening. It gave me time to recruit. And I had the head bartender from J. Alexander's. I had the head trainer from Yaya's. I had the two great servers from Yahoo's. And I got our grill cook from Hereford House. So we were able to bring in kind of an all-star crew, and it really helped when you're opening your very first restaurant, your very first concept, and the training manual is in process, the recipes are in process, the point of sale is in process. So having people that could figure things out on the fly was great. However, the team didn't work well together. It didn't work well. There are a lot of prima donnas. So the leadership style, evolution for me was really about surrounding me and my partner with people that understood what we wanted to accomplish, both in terms of culture, service, food, cleanliness. Through all that time of all the restaurants I worked in, the good news was all of them had a mission statement. And we created a mission statement before we opened it. And it's been just modified twice in 25 years by a word or two. We developed core values. And the first time after we hire an employee, when we orientate them, we make sure they understands what our mission statement, our core values are. And it's written down in black and white. And so that's really the main thing is people.
Yeah. How often are you going back to your mission statement and your core values with your team? Because I know a lot of that is stemming from the culture that you bring to the table and that you are striving for. But I know a lot of companies, they have a mission statement, they have core values, but it's very rare that they're constantly referring to them, they're going back to them and reminding themselves and their team, this is why we're here, this is what we're doing it for.
Yeah. Well, the mission statement and core values are printed. They're in our what we call expo area, the outer part of the kitchen, where we have a lot of we do pre-shifts every day. So they get to see them every day, and we revert to them during those pre-shift times. If a manager, I tell managers that if they make a decision and it's the wrong decision, but you made it using our mission statement and our core value, then good for you, all right? It didn't work out this time, but good for you. So having them posted, having them talked about in pre-shift, we have, twice a year, we have all manager meetings. Every manager in our company meets for breakfast, and we certainly talk about the core values and the mission statement at that time. And, we have Monday morning Zoom calls, and we talk about the mission statement every Monday morning with all the GMs.
That's great.
Good question.
I think it's reassuring, especially for the team, to know that, you have this circle of influence around you. And in this case, it's words that you are running your company by. I think it's really nice to see, because it's very easy to say, this is our culture, this is our core values, this is our mission. But if you're not following it to a T and living to it, it goes by the wayside.
Yeah.
Hey, Kevin, since you've transitioned to ownership, do you feel like people look at you or treat you, your employees, do you feel like they treat you differently than when you were like a regional manager, director of operations? Has there been any change in that?
No, I don't really get it. I think from the guest perspective, I get it a little bit more. One of the biggest compliments we would get is that people, when we opened, thought we were part of the PB&J group, and that's a very well-run organization. And I tell Paul that frequently. That, as a matter of fact, I delivered a speech at the Black Tie Gala, and I actually mentioned it in the speech that what an honor it was to be considered a PB&J restaurant, and that people thought PB&J was corporate. Well, it's a family-run restaurant company they had, but they did have a lot of restaurants in different states. So they had to lean on more corporate strategies to communicate and manage. But that's a good question. I think now I'm trying to really, I'm trying to think when we first opened, whether or not I had that feeling. When you had a bad shift, when we have all had them, when you had a rough shift, and you're the owner, boy, you really hear it a little bit more on your face, I think, than when you're a corporate leader.
Sure. How about culturally? How about culturally? Do you feel like you were able to create something that's different as the owner and operator of a restaurant versus when you were in a corporate environment? Do you think you created a different culture, better culture, different culture?
Well, in 2025, we hired 5 servers at Nick and Jake's in Overland Park. In 2024, we hired 4 for the entire year. So there's something about the culture that is working. And there are restaurants that they could leave to and get higher check average, and sure enough, some do. We got to remember that what we're here for. And we're here for the guests. We're here for our employees. And we've got to also know that we're a stepping stone. Restaurants are a stepping stone for a lot of people. And sometimes an employee will give notice and the managers get all bummed out and all upset about it. And I got to remind them that, hey, this person graduated college 2 years ago and stayed with us for 2 extra years, but it's time that we open the door and let them and you are an important part of their life and getting them to their next, and so that is the culture. Our Parkville restaurant, by the way, is a little bit bigger than this one, and they had similar results in terms of turnover in the front of the house. So very proud of the last couple of years.
So that's pretty unheard of in restaurants, to be hiring at such limited numbers on the floor. What do you attribute that to? Your culture is a big piece of it, but go into a little bit of depth there. How are you treating your employees? What kind of conversations are you having? What are you saying to them?
Well, we've got really good managers. So oftentimes, people will leave if they're not making enough money. They'll leave if they don't like managers. They'll leave if they don't like the culture. They'll leave if they don't like the guests. You got to understand all the different reasons that they might leave. Our managers are good. They're solid and they're motivated. And I'm able to, at times, save people. We also have all 3 restaurants, all 3 Nick and Jake's. We also have a really nice system where we hire high school or close to high school host staff and bus staff, but they quickly realize that they have a pathway to become a server and make more money.
Yeah. And Kevin, real quick, your screen went dark. There you go.
Yeah,
cool.
You're back.
Yeah, something came on when I started doing hand signals. A thing came on, so I don't know where you lost me. Where we lost you?
We still hear. You can just keep going with your train of thought.
Oh, okay. Well, so when I say we only hired 4 servers last year, well, we promoted 4 hosts to server. Mm-hmm. So and then when they've got the work ethic at the front desk, they understand the culture. They understand rights away. They now take to-go orders. They understand the menu. They're able to just assimilate into that. And then, man, are they helpful summertime and during the holidays, getting them back for when our core employees might want to take some time off. our college kids come in and really save the day and do a great job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always nice to see that internal growth and watch people blossom from being
Yeah.
in that environment, especially once they get involved and they feel the culture, they feel the excitement of working with guests, and they get to see the different departments and how they function. They just become so intertwined with how the restaurant operates that it's seamless to them, right? It's an easy progression in their career, whether it is a career or if it's, a summer job or something get through high school and college.
Yeah.
When you have that buy-in from them, it makes the world a difference.
When we first opened, I would send employees, when we had just one restaurant, handwritten birthday cards. And then we had a second restaurant, and then we just lost it. And honestly, we forgot all about it until the emergence of these digital manager logs. So every morning that you go in, we've set it so that, like this morning, I was able to read the notes from last night, and I was also able to see that today is Riley's birthday and tomorrow's Troy's birthday. And so I'm reading all three, taking advantage of the technology and being able to wish your employees a birthday, or it even has their work anniversaries. So, Alex, I don't know when you stopped working in restaurants, we used to have the Red Book. You remember the manager's log?
I remember the Red Book very well, trying to figure out the handwriting from someone at 4:00 in the morning, leaving me notes.
Yeah. Yeah. So and so taking advantage of that technology has helped us with our culture.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you look back at, your path of ownership and success in the restaurant space, it's easy for people to see all the glitz, the glory, the fun, the excitement of it, but there's a lot of hardship. There's a lot of pain behind it. What's been the most difficult part for you on this journey that people don't see?
Well, yeah, you're right. It's not all glory and glitz. There's been, it usually when you've got an employee issue, that's what weighs on me the most. That's the hardest issue. Or, whether you're the owner or you're working as a general manager for a company, if you have a problem with a guest, I mean, that's always going to be a thing, But knowing that your decision is final is one of the hardest things. And I do the best I can to consult my business partner because he doesn't see it every day. So he helps me see the light on a problem. I make sure that he is involved in the interview process. I mean, I don't think he's been in our Shawnee restaurant in a year. My partner hasn't. Jake's dad. But he knows all the managers because I made him interview. And it works for me because he sees them twice a year at our meetings. He sees them occasionally in the restaurants. But if I have a problem, I'm able to talk to him about it a little bit better because he has a little understanding. The toughest part of ownership is probably on the people side. Certainly, making those decisions to go from asphalt to concrete and spending $50,000 at a chunk. Yeah. That's when, Alex, I agree with you. It's easier to spend other people's money. It's when you're talking about money at that level, You take it depends on who you're talking about. When I would work for a company, I took my homework with me every day. I mean, I carry it around on my shoulders for my day off. It upset me. And no different than when I'm an owner. Some people can compartmentalize a little bit better than me and not worry about it. I've certainly learned how to do that. You have to.
Yeah. Do you have any guests, memories, or stories that stick out with you as like a real lesson that you kind of revert back to over time and say, this was a pivotal moment?
Well, I'll tell you one. It has to do with the restaurant in Chicago, and then it picks back up in Overland Park. So we were doing a surprise birthday party for a gal. Her husband was turning 50, and she was spending about 10 or 15 grand on this dinner. And somehow the communication about the surprise party, one of our banquet gals made a mistake and sent the fax at the wrong time, and the husband saw it. And it was 2 days before the party. The banquet manager came down almost in tears. She says, "I can't handle this lady. She's absolutely berserk. Can you jump in?" And so I talked to her on the phone. I talked her off the cliff. I told her we'll do something above and beyond. I don't know what it is yet. So at that time, you were able to get Dom Perignon for roughly maybe $170 a bottle. So I ordered 12 bottles of Dom Perignon. And when he came in, he acted like he was surprised. We opened the Dom Perignon, poured it for everyone. I gave a nice little toast and then left. And then the following year on that day, I sent her flowers on the day. On his birthday, I sent her flowers, thanking her for staying with us on that evening. So we're opening Nick and Jake's in Overland Park, and the Budweiser guy, Bill Fitzmaurice, and his wife came in, and they're sitting at the bar, and we've been open a couple months, and I go over and say hello, and she looks at me and says, "I know you." And I'm like, "Well, I just moved here." She goes, "I know you. Where did you work before?" And I said, "I was in Chicago." She goes, "You're the Dom Perignon guy."
That's a good reputation to have.
So yeah, I wish I still was. But every now and then, when I'm dealing with a manager that's trying to deal with a guest, I tell them that story, because that was about as hard of a conversation as I had to have. And the banquet manager, when I told her we're going to send her flowers, she teared up. She teared up, like, wow, okay, I get it. You know,
that's a strong move. That's a very impressive move that you remembered a year later to send her flowers.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
outstanding.
Yeah, that's with using that's.
Yeah. What about on the other end of that spectrum? Right? Was there a moment that you were like, oh, "Shit, what did I get myself into?"
Nope. Truth be told, you sent me this. I never really felt that way, even when we were having construction problems. Even when we were having hiring, staffing, never once did I really feel. I was 35 when we opened. I was still young enough that I had to go in one night and I had to terminate the manager that was doing the writing the server schedule. And this was 6 months in, and I went in and had dinner and terminated him, and then closed the restaurant. And the next morning called a young lady who was working at my front desk only 2 days a week because she had 2 babies and she could only work part-time. But she was an amazing young lady, and she actually still works for us 25 years later. And I can remember when I fired him, that was about as most I was like, man, what am I going to do? I called her and I asked her if she'd like to write the server schedule. Because now I'm the only manager, me and one other. And so she said, yeah. I said, come in, I'll train you how to do it. And thankfully, I had to write server schedules for years. And she wrote the server schedule for 3 years.
That's great.
But I'm not kidding you, Alex. That was the one moment where I'm like, oh, man. But I never really felt that. We were busy when we opened in June of 2001, and we were on a wait every single shift until 9/11. And, 9/11 comes, and you're like, oh, boy, wow, nobody's going out, But still, roll your sleeves up.
The reason I like asking this question to operators and owners is from a story. It was my first day. I was 21 years old. I had just started managing a restaurant in Philadelphia. And it was a monster. We were doing about $18 million a year, 3 stories, rooftop lounge. And we have these radios on. And I get this call saying, Alex, there's a little problem in the men's restroom. Would you mind going down and taking care of it? I said, sure. And I go down there, and there's about a 300-pound man completely naked in the bathroom. And I said, what am I doing here? And this is 20 years ago. I'm probably 155 pounds soaking wet.
Yeah.
How do I get out of this situation? So I'll tell you how we got out of it offline on a separate story.
Okay.
But yeah, that was why I like asking that question, because it really puts things in perspective of this is where I'm going to spend the next 30, 40 years of my life.
Yeah.
Alex, you made me tell a quick story, but when I was opening up a restaurant on Disney property in Orlando, one of the cashiers disappeared, and we couldn't find her anywhere. And all of a sudden, someone starts screaming from the women's restroom, "Oh my God, call an ambulance." And so we call an ambulance. She's in the restroom, and she gives birth to a baby.
Oh my gosh.
In the women's restroom, okay? And all of us were shocked. Not only did she give birth but we didn't know she was pregnant. And the most shocking part of this, and this is a true story, is that she did not know herself that she was pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
So
Wow.
that's an
Wow.
unbelievable story. And it's true. So think about that for a while. But
Yeah.
Evan, you had shared some words of wisdom, which I thought were great. One was never consider opening your own restaurant until you've worked in the industry yourself. And I can't tell you how many restaurant operators, independent restaurant operators, call us to find general managers and other staff that have never worked in the industry before and just decided to buy their own restaurant. And they don't know what they're doing, and they're learning at their own expense and not at the expense of others. The other statistic, and I don't know if it's still true, is that, independent restaurant operators, 80% of them fail in the first year, and those who succeed in the first year, 50% of those fail in the second year. I mean, I always remembered that statistic because it's such a risk for someone to do this, and especially if you've never worked in the industry. And I give you a lot of credit for having the success that you've had and creating that culture. But for corporate, operators like yourself thinking about going into independent ownership, what should they prepare for? Is there anything that, you have thoughts on that you really need to be prepared for this?
Making sure you have someone that is really managing the human resource side, because there are so many tricky little lawsuits out there and Department of Labor type stuff, recording tips, pools. There's so many things that can get you in trouble. Typically, if you're using a ADP or a Paychex or a Paycor, they've got the human resource side internally, and they're going to suggest things to you. But having someone be able to do that and look over your shoulder, I think is really important. And by the way, our first day we opened, our hostess, Ashley Jack, who was doing QuickBooks for her dad's concrete business. After that first day we opened, we offered her a bookkeeping job. She then became became a salaried bookkeeper and manager. And then she became our company controller. She met a husband. She helped put him through law school. She has 2 beautiful kids, and 25 years later, she's still working with us. So she is that person. She is that person that, I was on a webinar yesterday with the National Restaurant Association about ICE rates and ICE visits. And it was fascinating, actually. And matter of fact, I learned a lot, and Ashley was on it. And sure enough, when I wake up this morning, there's a great email from her to all 3 restaurants about I-9 audits and a couple other things. And, it's so the human resource side is really important. Making sure that you really follow health department regulations. I mean, if someone calls the health department and complains, the health department has to come in and do an inspection, and who knows what they find. But the more inspections they do, the more you can keep that A on your front door, then the less chances you have for those phone calls.
There's so much more in restaurant operations than people really think. You have to be a jack of all trades, a master of all trades in order to run a successful restaurant. And it's funny to see people who've never worked in this industry before go out and try it and see the frustration on their face. I get it, but I don't know any other industry where people can do that. Right.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people that you wake up and say, I'm going to, open up be a lawyer and create a law firm or a marketing agency. You need to have that history to it to really understand and appreciate it.
There was go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
There was a group. There was a group here of Republicans that were floating my name around to run against Sharice Davids here for Congress when she beat Kevin Yoder, who was the incumbent Republican. And this was maybe 3 election cycles ago. And I explored it. But the conversation that I had with Kevin Yoder when he came in, had lunch with my wife and I, and he said to me, Kevin, we were kind of overlooking the bar. He said, if you wanted to change the servers' uniforms, how hard would that be? And I said, that wouldn't be very hard. He said, if you wanted to change a menu item, how hard would that be? I said, not very hard. He said, if you wanted to hire a certain person, how hard would it be? Not very hard. And we started talking about immediate gratification from the guest perspective. And that's my thing. And he basically said, none of that happens in Washington. I mean, Nothing happens easy. Nothing happens quickly. And you just rarely ever have that immediate gratification. And it was at that moment. And I still get approached every now and then about stuff like that. And I just know where my role is. And I like being the Dom Perignon guy. I like buying a birthday dessert for someone. And I like seeing people grow and grow within our culture and have a good, successful life. When you were talking about that situation in the bathroom, there's an interview question I have with managers that if there's a mess in the bathroom, like throw up or something, who's going to clean it up? And those first couple years, if I was in the building and something like that happened, I made sure I was the guy that went in and cleaned it up. And I also made sure that my employees knew that I was the guy that was cleaning it up. And not that I was going around bragging about it, but I just wanted to make sure they knew that I was sneaking into the ladies' restroom with a mop bucket. And when the managers say the dishwasher, or the managers say, "Well, it's not me," that's a bad answer. But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for people that are willing to roll their sleeves up and take care of it, and being a role model for others to do the same.
Yep. Well said. Well said. Now, if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice from day one in this journey, what would it be?
I could have leaned into Ashley a little bit more on the human resource side a little bit earlier. I think I had to learn a couple painful lessons before I realized that she was right under my wings, that she could help with that. I think, I just don't know. There's probably just a lot of things, a lot of little things. And I think I overworked myself at first. And because of that, I had a little bit of a quick temper, maybe. And I think and now I don't work nearly as much, and I never have a temper. But I think that the stress of the work and the amount of hours, I coached my sons and my daughters. I coached every one of their soccer, baseball, and football and softball teams. I was never the head coach. I never had to spend any of the time administratively, but I would oftentimes leave the restaurant, go coach, and then come back to the restaurant, and those hours added up, and it's just tiring. It was extremely tiring. I think at some point I learned to work smarter and not harder. And I think that's probably, I wish I would have learned that quicker and done that. We're opening our fourth restaurant. I'm not going to tell you I know all 220 employees' names, but I'm pretty darn close to knowing every one of their names. And that's why, when I was in Atlanta, North Atlanta, I had Minnesota, had a restaurant in Nashville for a time. I was doing franchise visits in the Northeast, and I couldn't connect with guests. I couldn't connect with employees and build those relationships. Well, I love playing golf with my bar regulars, And you just got to kind of understand who you want to be. You want to get on an airplane every week and go do that thing, that corporate thing? Or do you want to be able to enjoy the fruits of your hard work and your passions?
I couldn't agree more. I think, especially those early days, it's hard to have that perspective, right? You need to put in the hustle, you need to have the grit. But I think at this point, you've clearly earned your keep, and it's very impressive what you've built. And I hope people are listening and taking advantage of the advice that you have given everyone. We really appreciate you taking this time and being on the show with us, Kevin.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I appreciate all the help you have given us on our new restaurant. You have helped us hire our general manager, and I actually just spent some time with him this morning. He hasn't given notice at his current job yet, but he's helping us pick out the china and the glassware and all of that, because I trust him and I want him to be empowered in decisions. Thank you for that.
Awesome. Of course. Thank you, Kevin.
Of course. Excellent. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate everyone tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kevin. Bye. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to Hospitality Connection. We hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with us on LinkedIn and other social channels to keep the conversation going. Join us next week for more insights, stories, and strategies from the hospitality industry, because when we share knowledge, we all grow. Until then, stay connected and keep elevating hospitality.